Welcome to Maine, we're stretched to the bone. Prices keep rising, the paycheck stays prone. Inflation keeps knocking, won't leave us alone. They're selling the lie, groceries climbing, the gas tank is low. The bill's hitting harder than snow, but silence still blankets the truth. Where does it go? They're selling the lie. Housing is gridlocked from Portland to the county. Workers commute far past what feels soundly. Talk of solution comes yearly, not loudly. They're selling the lie. But watch who gets lifted. Some stories vanish, some get the spotlight shifted. Depends on what trends and what keeps them gifted. They're selling the lie. I won't believe them, I wanna believe, but truth's always stuck in between. Static and spin, drown the signal again. It seems I wanna believe you, but every headline turns daylight into redesigned skies. Facts get twisted, context missing. We choke on the simplified alibis. Wanna believe you, but all I see is shadows where the answer should shine. The fact is fiction, conviction.
Welcome to the Muddy Waters Podcast, where Mainers tell their stories.
Morning, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters Podcast. As you all know, the Muddy Waters Podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on in our state by interviewing people from around the state who can share from real-life stories or share the information that the Democrat Party and their propaganda arm, also known as the mainstream media, Portland Press Herald, BDN, all that other fun stuff, they don't want you to know about because they have an agenda, and that is perfectly aligned with the Democrat Party. It's a communist agenda to take over our country, unfortunately. And so we're here to try and shed some light on some things that are going on. And I wanted to bring on Alan Servinas. So thank you for joining us, Alan, of Parental Rights in Education and Maine Civic Action. Can we give you both titles today?
Maine Education Initiative.
Maine Education Initiative, yep. Because one of the things that is has been really frustrating to me as I watch school board or city council meetings where they're talking about the school board budget and school board meetings where they're talking about the school board budget, and just hearing the Democrats who control most of those school boards, even though they're supposed to be nonpartisan, right? Basically browbeating voters and telling them that they don't have any choice, that these are all government mandated things that have to legally be done. Otherwise, we as a city are to be sued. And basically stupid, uneducated, who don't understand voters and taxpayers shut up, sit down, and let the professionals who know what they're doing tell you how things need to be done. And don't worry, if you lose your home, we will provide one for you, I guess. I don't know. They just don't care. But anyway, like, it's just that there's this complete disregard in these conversations for taxpayers, and like they want to act as though the taxpayers don't matter, that they're not actually beholden to the taxpayers, but they're voted in by the taxpayers. So there's that. But one of the things that I was looking at and noticed, and I'll shut up in a moment. I just kind of want to, like, this is kind of what prompted me to like want to have you come on and talk about this stuff, is I was watching Westbrook, where I live, my school board, and looking at their budget increases, which I love it when they increase the budget by like $3 million and then they say they've made cuts. And I'm like, no. This, I don't understand. An increase in the budget is not a cut. That is an increase. You didn't increase it as much as you wanted, but you increased it. And so then they talk about all the reasons why, for instance, Westbrook, as an example, which has 5 schools, needs 9 vice principals. And why they need, all these additional special ed teachers, because 27% of the population in Westbrook is special ed. 60% of the population of the students apparently are living in poverty, despite the fact that only 8% of the town is living in poverty. So there's some questions I have there. And I think I know the answers. But but their argument for why so many kids are special ed is because poverty apparently leads to special ed. This is the argument that the AI would tell you, and I argued with AI about that. But anyway, but yeah, so 27% in Westbrook, which is 6% above the state average, which is 8%. The state average is 8% above the national average of kids identifying as special ed. So all these things, I wanted to, because a big part of the conversation seems to be that more and more kids are identifying as special ed, which is leading to more mandates by the state, is what the school boards are presenting, for the reason that they need to hire so many more special ed teachers, and that is actually the reason for the increase. And if I look back, I lived up in the Farmington area about 10 years ago, and I remember people talking about the school budget then, and I remember looking at the school budget back then, and the big reason for the increase in their school budget was special ed. So this is a trend that's been happening for a long time, and I figured now I will shut up and let you kind of go ahead and explain to us what the heck is going on and why we don't need to believe the lies of the school boards.
Appreciate having me on, Chuck. Local school board spending, local school board operations is definitely muddy waters. So to have a conversation about this. Well, I think at first we can accept that there's more attention locally on school budgets, town budgets, because the fact is that over almost a decade, the entire state government has been ruled by one party, the Democrat Party. And they flooded the zone with spending, and now we have a healthcare crisis. We have an education crisis where they've admitted they need to get back to basics just 6 months after prioritizing social and emotional learning. So people are unhappy, right? They're unhappy trying to jump in from grocery store to grocery store, trying to find the cheapest good. They're tired of going to the gas station and having gas prices go up and down. Overall sentiment of the cost of living, the quality of living has gone down in the last decade, and now it's pouring down to more attention at the local level of school board budget. School board budgets can be tough. The fact is, every 3 years, the school board has an obligation, a duty to negotiate a contract with the teachers union. And once that contract is signed, the budget, about 80%, 75 to 85% of the budget is frozen in terms of salaries and wages. So one main question that has to be kept at the forefront is that enrollment is continuing to plummet. Maine has skyrocketed to the top of the charts in terms of the percentage of students that are homeschooled in private school. But why do you need more and more teachers? Why do you need more and more employees, administration primarily, when your enrollment continues to plummet? So that's one big, that's what you have to keep in the forefront to have people understand why there's so much, disagreement with the school budget, right? The outcomes aren't going up. The Department of Education has also. And all the national rankings and everything else has shown that the Maine schools are in the bottom 5, if not the bottom 3. So people are frustrated. So what can you do about it? Well, one reason the last couple decades that school boards have gone towards the more state level liberal Democrat spending is because these school board seats, when the elections come around, the teachers union, retired teachers union, they get involved, they get people elected, and then essentially negotiate with themselves when it comes negotiations time. Now that's natural, right? I mean, they're looking out for themselves, but the community doesn't know that. The community doesn't know that they basically have union allies and union on both sides of the table negotiating contracts, which can be seen in terms of what their pay increases are per year and the bonus they get. It used to be similar to the private sector. You'd get maybe a bonus and then 3, 4, 5% increase, and now they're starting at 7. Right, right here in MSAD 75 tops them. Not the last the one before that. In 3 years they got almost a 24% increase. Okay, so that's and when that is contributing to 80% of your budget, that's going to make the budget skyrocket, and it's going to drive up property taxes very fast. So people need to be aware that during these school board elections, they're not as popular, they're not as marketed as well as federal elections or even state elections, but they're the ones that are driving up your property taxes. And that's why we've had more focus on them with the Maine Civic Action, which we, know that liberty starts locally.
Yeah. It absolutely does, and this is one of the things that we try to emphasize on this show. Obviously, we talk a lot about school boards. A lot of our guests are people who run for or try to influence around school boards in different situations, and parents who have brought their concerns to school boards. Because one of the things that I say is that one of the problems, in addition to the fact that the mainstream media is a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party, is that they also just want you to focus on what's happening in Washington, D.C. or right now, Iran, right? They want you to focus on that because that way it's easier for them to do stuff behind your back in your backyard. In the with the city planning, school boards, and city councils, town councils, select boards. As well as even in Augusta, they don't want people to know what's actually going on. I take painstaking efforts to get people who are in Augusta, who are legislators, to come on and talk about what's actually happening, even in Augusta. And it's hard to get information out about and for people to care because everybody's so focused on what's happening in Washington, D.C. And the reality is what's happening in our backyard is much more important than what's happening in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. matters, right? But where you have the most ability to have impact and have the most ability to impact your taxes is your school boards and city councils, and we can't get people to run for those seats. We can't get people to get up and show up and vote for those seats, and so it's a challenge. So we need the help of anybody and everybody, but. But in terms, so obviously all those things matter, and that's they're the ones that decide the school board budgets. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the mandating that we're talking about how they want to claim that because so many kids are identifying as special ed, they have to hire these additional teachers. And again, going back to actually briefly to your point about the administration, Maine, I think we're 8th or 9th highest what we pay per student in the nation. So we pay some of the most per student, but we pay our teachers some of the near the bottom. Our teachers are mid to low 30s last I checked in terms of pay. And so where's the money going, right? And you highlighted the amount of money we spend on administration as being one of the issues that drives up costs. Because the two most important things that I can see that impact a child's education and their ability to be successful in life is parental engagement and involvement. And there are a lot of ways in which they're trying to drive a wedge between parents and their children. But the other side is the teachers. The teachers actually do matter, and I think there's a lot of people in Maine, because of some activist teachers, that are upset about teachers. But we can't retain good teachers because of the administration and what they're forcing the teachers to do and frustrating them more than anything. But also, I think if we are going to be spending a bunch of money, shouldn't the money be going to the teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever there's those people that want to run for school board and we're providing training, one of the things we tell them is that they need to be pro money to the classroom. Money to the classroom goes to the kids. Money to the classroom goes to the teachers. Over the last, this has been a growing issue over the last few decades, and teachers are becoming more facilitators. They have teacher leaders, they have curriculum leaders, and what is going to the teacher to then facilitate to the students is controlled. There's less and less local developed curriculum with teachers and their program and their department head. These are canned programs that are being lobbied from other nonprofits and organizations that want to bring the newest shiny toy, which that also drives up the cost. Regarding special education, they've been driving this wedge using special education, the school board budget and parents forever. But it wasn't until recently, a couple years ago, and the Honorable Heidi Sampson actually brought this to the state committee, the state education committee, to show is that we were able to obtained some documents from the state coordinator, state director of special education, with correspondence to all school special education directors. And this was in a conversation with Drummond and Woodson. And in that conversation, Drummond and Wood, the special ed directors at the local level, were complaining and saying, we do not have the labor to facilitate, to execute, to succeed with all these IEPs or individual education plans. The response by the state and Drummond and Woodson is, we know. It wasn't, we'll help you out. We'll try to look at the equation, EPS formula, anything but we know, and we advise you to form inter-district, behind the scenes, not public, small groups of your special education team, go through your student IEPs and pick which ones need them the most. And Drummond and Woodson, and then there's these complaints that parents have that the IEPs are not being successfully monitored, right? They're not every single bullet point in the IEP is being facilitated. And Drummond Woodson's response was, when parents sign up for an IEP, they're signing up for a Chevy, not a Cadillac education. And that's in quotation marks. Okay, so there is well understanding by the State Department of Education, well understanding by Drummond and Woodson, and well understanding by the local special education directors, that the amount in the concept of individual education plans, IEPs, is considerably out of control. Part of that, our parents, they do talk about it outside of school, on the soccer fields, in the grocery store. They compare their IEPs, or they talk about APs. So it has come somewhat of a trend socially. But at the same time, can you blame a parent for wanting their kid to have an individualized education plan? I mean, of course we all do, right? That's kind of, when parents withdraw their kids and they bring them into homeschool, that's what they're getting. They're getting individual education plans. But the fact is that it's a public utility, and from the very beginning, it was never accomplishable, right? It was never going to succeed in trying to create an IEPs for everyone. And parents need to step back and actually do the inverse, which is fight for their child not to have an IEP. The number one trend across successful educations is the educational environment within the home. It's nothing else. Over the last 6 decades, you can show very clearly that spending and academic outcomes have nothing to do with each other. They're running out of time to prove that. But at this point, the special education budget is funded mostly, or if not all, from the state level. That's where they're coming with the mandates. But to cut the budget, back to the core of this, to cut the budget, you have to reduce full-time employees. Every 3 years, your school budget has to have a backbone and say, listen, we're going to give you increases in pay. People deserve to get paid fair trade for their labor. But 7%, 8% increase is 2-3 times the private market. And there's no single business out there in the private market that could, withstand giving those kinds of bonuses every year, locked in for 3 years. So there is plenty of, so at this point, when it's very hard to organize around a budget. When people find out that the budget is frozen for almost 30 years because 80% of it's been negotiated, that goes right back to laying off administration. And as soon as that comes up, everyone freezes. No one wants to go into the public. No one wants to go to public comment. Nobody wants to talk on a school board about reducing full-time employees because you're taking livelihoods away. So they've kind of created this, and that's why we focus more on activating local new leaders to step up, run for school board, and start negotiating for all taxpayers, instead of having these, instead of the union owning or controlling most of the board. So when they go into negotiations, they negotiate with themselves, right? If you're going into a negotiation and negotiating with somebody who can get you unelected because they got you elected, then you're probably not going to argue too much of what what kind of pay increases they have. That's why it's so hard to organize around the budget. Now one thing, those who want to fight or want to oppose the budget, they would be better off targeting the May school board referendum vote rather than the June. There's much less people that show up to the the school board vote instead of June. So if there's less people, then your vote has more impact. But yeah, I mean, it's a terrible catastrophe, to be honest with you. People, from my experience, people don't mind paying for education. But the fact is the outcomes aren't matching what has been paid and what's going out. Also, you have major inflation from government spending. Almost half of inflation is due to government deficit. So it's all kind of correct, all coming together at the local level, provoking moral outrage. And then when they get the specifics on the budget, they see that it's you either start cutting, laying off employees, or cutting 50,000 here, 100,000 here. And when your budgets are 50, 60 million dollars, that doesn't seem like a big deal. But I can tell you that the mandated wage increases at the state level, that may be just sneaking by in Portland and Falmouth, where there's higher incomes, but it is crushing towns in the rural areas, especially CD2, like Hodgdon. When we were up there talking to them, the people, they were almost in tears, right? Every year raising their budget 25, 30%, just to keep up with the state mandating wages. And the fact is, employees of the school district can leave if they're not happy with their wages. All right, they're not mandated. They're not in a compelled state like the students. So you can't just keep mandating wages on towns and areas in Maine that can't afford it. And that's what the state leadership, the state majority, which over the last decade has been one single party, is doing to these towns. Is they're driving their people out. They're driving them into more poverty.
Yeah, it's wild that these people who claim to care about poor people are making people poor. Like, I mean, when there are so many people who worked really hard, they bought their house, they made wise financial investments, and thought that they had enough money to be able to survive in retirement, and they retired under this assessment. And then, the amount of inflation that we've seen, is outside of the control for sure of the school boards and city councils. But there is an element where they play a part, right? Like in inflation, what is it? The cost of living, as you made a comment, like I worked in the private sector, right? Unless you were an above average performer, you did really well, right? You're looking at 2 to 3%. Sometimes, and if you were just an average performer and you didn't excel, you might not get a raise. That's the private sector. And so, I look at it and I say, like, these people basically have guaranteed increases. There's no evaluations of their performance. And look at, Maine is, as we've said, like ranked like near the bottom. So we're paying more and more money. We're getting worse results. And then on top of it, they will browbeat us. I'm very irked about this because I got so angry and frustrated and felt even like a little bit helpless. Like, what can we possibly do here in Westbrook? As I listened to these people for an hour, between the chair of the school board, the superintendent, one of the other school board members, just sit there and browbeat anybody who would possibly disagree with them because you guys aren't smart enough. You don't understand. We cut this back as much as we possibly could. These things are all mandated. They're all required. And it's like, it doesn't sound like that's actually real. And it looks a lot like, again, the reason that they claim to need so many administrators at over $100,000 a pop for these vice principals is because of the number of special ed, which is also why they need all these extra special ed teachers at, when you look at the full benefits package, what, 70,000, like between salary and then the benefits package, like 60, 70, maybe more $1,000 a pop it's not really mandated. They're just saying that. And nobody is educated enough because they intentionally try to make sure we don't know, which is, again, part of the reason we exist and try to do this podcast, and the reason that Maine Education Initiative exists, and the reason, Parental Rights and Education, the stuff that you guys are doing. But to your point, yeah, a lot of people are very comfortable like paying money for education because of the manipulative tactics of the school boards and the unions that basically argue that if you are not in favor of the school board, it's because you hate our children. Like, it's this absolute lie from the pit of hell. I'm pissed off because you're not educating the kids and you're wasting a crap ton of money at a time where people can't afford it. Like, all the other costs have driven up so much that it's so incredibly unaffordable to live here in the state of Maine. And on top of that, oh wait, here we're coming with some increases and well above inflation.
Yeah, absolutely. One part of the budget that is usually non-negotiable is called maintenance of effort. Right, this is your gas price, your maintenance. Part of the costs that are going up with new contracts with vendors that you don't have any. So that's another part of the budget that you can't control unless you put things back out to bid. But then when you put them back out to bid, you realize that everybody's getting hit with inflation. So it really does come down to full-time employees. And the fact is, the federal and state government has continued to mandate more data reporting, more reporting of everything, more tracking of everything, because the more you track and manage, the more you can control it. And it's just bloat after bloat of administration. Every chart, every popular chart that gets the most engagement from social media to in person are the charts that show administration skyrocketing and spending skyrocketing while outcomes go down. Right, that has to stay at the forefront and saying, listen, you can say you need more money for education. You can say you need more money for special education teachers, for more vice principals, but that you've done that for 40 years, 50 years, probably, it's not true. Like that. What is the point? The point isn't so when you go to work, you can feel like you aren't being overworked or not. You don't have to work there. The fact is, are the outcomes. And if you start prioritizing the outcomes, things will change. There's arguments in terms of a correlation between classroom learning and small size and large size classrooms. There was an effort here, and the superintendent ended up disappointing me a great deal. But in the beginning, here in SAD 75, there were 6 teacher lead positions. That these leads, once a month would go around and have presentations and teach, the other teachers better instruction or curriculum. Well, he took those 6 and consolidated them to 1 and cut 5 positions at 60 to 80,000 apiece. That's what has to happen. You have to find a way to consolidate full-time employees. It's not easy, but at the same, at the end of the day, your senior citizens, you're retired, you're disabled, you're poverty, they're going to be less and less likely to buy homes at this point. For almost like I've said, for almost a decade, and a lot locally, there's been a one party who's controlled the entire state government of Maine. Now that they have driven this next generation's ability to buy a home off, right? The average home is now $440,000. The next generation is not going to be able to buy a home. So now they're turning to local community schools, and they're closing those down. And that's entirely to maintain spending. So they're not learning their lesson. And some argue, and it's that the more money you pull into education, the money you pull into salaries is the more money that's paid paid right back up to the unions that fund half of the political activity in the state, especially in Maine. They have a very large footprint in Maine. It's a cycle that has been going on, and now it's not a fixed amount, right? So the more the wages increase, the more money the teachers union is going to get. And at this point, the teacher unions are very, very overt in their political stances, the ideology, and political activities.
Yeah, well, it's devastating for Maine taxpayers, and we need more people to vote down our school budgets. But more importantly, I think we need people to run for school board. We need to get the right people in those positions, people who have a backbone, a spine, who can look at things and say, no, you're not going to get every single wish that you want, superintendent. You work for us. You need to take in mind everybody right now is struggling to figure out how to survive financially here in the state of Maine. The schools need to think that way too. They cannot get away with, these obscene increases simply because they hide behind these mandates. Like, the reality is everybody is having to dig deep, and they need to as well. People are foregoing improvement, fixing things with their house, fixing their car, and like, buying the things that they really need. And then the school board comes in and says, oh no, you've got to spend more. And it's asinine, and it needs to stop. And we got to get people elected to city council, school boards to fix this. But we also need people in we need to win back the Maine state legislature so we can fix some of the issues related to mandates, because that's a problem as well. So, well,
it's a failed business.
Yeah.
If it was the private sector, it would have gone bankrupt by now.
Absolutely. And yeah, eventually it's going to bankrupt enough of its people that only the wealthy are going to be able to live here. And then the party that supposedly cares about the poor will have driven the poor out of, basically what they constantly do. And I'm so tired of it, because they claim to care about people, but they're really the power of slavery, the party of slavery. That's what the Democrat Party is. They're enslaving the people to the system so that they cannot get off the system. They cannot escape, and they will constantly be owned, and they'll constantly go back to those people and be like, keep voting for us. See what we're doing for you. Keep voting for us. See what we're doing for you. And those people will think it's their only hope. The Republican Party is the party of empowerment. We believe you can do a better job managing your money than we can. We believe you can do a better job figuring out how to make sure that your children are successful in life than the education system. Parents need to be the primary driver in their children's education. If we leave it to the schools, it's going to go to hell, as it has. But if parents are involved, if parents are engaged, if you, the taxpayer, if you, the individual, want to advance your life, we actually believe that you can do a better job than the government holding your hand and showing you where to go pee. It's not going to work. It's not working. And it's just getting worse. So hopefully enough people realize what the heck is going on in our state, and we get in and we vote out these communists who are destroying our state, whether they're trying to or not. That's what they're doing, and get people with common sense elected. So thank you for what you do, Alan, all the on the ground grassroots stuff with Maine Civic Action, Maine Education Initiative, as well as Parental Rights and Education. I don't know how you wear all these hats, but but I appreciate all that you're doing, and just keep it up. And everybody at home, we'll be back here next on Friday. I've got somebody from the RNC regional communications director or whatever is going to be coming, talking about some more national stuff. But Mills Plattner, the midterms and dangerous Democrat rhetoric. So that'll be fun. But yeah, so thanks again, Alan. Appreciate you taking the time and everything that you do.
Oh, thank you. And just Maine Civic Action is a 501c4 nonprofit. The letter next to your name doesn't need to matter. We just need to know you're principally for liberty, self-determination, and trusting the people to get to their ends the way they feel need, and not state intervention.
All right. Well, thank you. All right, everybody. We'll